So imagine you're standing in a shattered field.
Mm-hmm.
The ground beneath your boots is just, it's vibrating,
Yeah.
right? But it's not from an earthquake.
Oh, no, definitely not.
It's this rhythmic, terrifying thud of like these towering mutant elephants crushing the front line of your allies.
Yeah, the Mumakil.
Exactly. And the skies above you are literally blotted out by winged monsters
Okay.
whose shrieks induce this kind of paralyzing somatic dread.
Just total sensory overload.
Right. And your king, this mythic leader who just rallied you from the absolute brink of despair, has just been crushed under the weight of his own horse.
Yeah, it's bleak.
It's so bleak. Now, in almost any other story, I mean, in any modern blockbuster movie or generic fantasy novel, this is the exact moment where the CGI takes over.
Right, where it just sits loud.
Yeah, the sensory overload peaks, and the actual human emotion just kind of dies on the vine. It becomes pixels hitting pixels. But in the Pelennor Fields, this is exactly where the deepest psychological trauma and, honestly, the most profound literary mechanics actually begin.
Which is precisely why this specific passage has survived the decades as, like, the gold standard of epic literature.
Totally.
I mean, we aren't just looking at a battle scene here.
No, not at all.
We are looking at a masterclass in how to anchor the monumental scale of an apocalypse in the deeply fragile, highly vulnerable reality of the human or, hobbit psyche.
Welcome to the deep dive.
Yeah.
We are so glad you're joining us because you brought us a really fascinating piece of source material
I
today.
did, yeah.
It's a deeply analytical exploration that actually bubbled up from the Princess Toynard YouTube channel's community.
Such a great community over there.
Oh, incredible discussions. And it's clear why this resonated so much with you. Because you, as the listener, aren't looking for a basic plot summary here.
Right. You know the story.
Exactly. You already know who swings the sword,
Yeah.
you know who rides the horse, and, well, you know who wins the battle.
Spoiler alert.
Right. But what this analysis attempts to do, and what our mission is today for this deep dive, is to dissect the architectural mechanics of how an author writes an explosive climax on a colossal scale without it devolving into meaningless spectacle.
Yeah. That's the million-dollar question.
How do you maintain that emotional signal amidst the deafening noise of a world-ending war?
It's a structural tightrope walk.
Yeah.
Honestly. Because the trap of the epic genre is that scale inherently dilutes intimacy.
Oh, 100%.
If you put 100,000 soldiers on a field, the reader's brain just cannot process 100,000 individual tragedies.
It just becomes a statistic at that point.
Exactly. But what this analysis highlights is how the text weaponizes realism. Specifically, the devastating realism of early 20th century mechanized warfare.
Right.
And it forces that modern trauma to collide with ancient mythic power.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the analysis you sent us starts by looking at the canvas itself, right? The physical geography of the Pelennor Fields right outside the besieged walls of Minas Tirith.
Yeah, setting the stage.
Sauron's forces haven't just challenged Gondor. They have pushed the city to the absolute brink of annihilation.
They're completely surrounded.
Right. But instead of just giving us a wide aerial shot of the armies like a movie would, the analysis points out that the text forces us into a very specific sensory nightmare.
He zooms way in.
Yeah. We have the clashing waves of the Rohirrim, the orcs, the trolls, the Haradrim warriors on those towering Mumakil we mentioned.
The war elephants, yeah.
But I want to push past the obvious, vivid, and cinematic labels we always hear thrown around.
Fair enough.
How exactly does the prose prevent this from becoming emotionally hollow? Like, what is the actual mechanism being used here?
Well, what's fascinating here is that the mechanism is psychological anchoring through sensory deprivation and hyperfocus.
Okay, wait. Break that down for me.
So the author isn't just giving you a list of cool monsters to look at, right? Think about the historical context underpinning this text.
World War I.
Exactly. We are dealing with an author who survived the trenches of the Somme. He experienced firsthand what it means to be a fragile, soft-bodied human being in the face of industrialized, mechanized slaughter.
Right, the sheer terror of it.
So when the text describes the thunder of hooves or the clash of steel, it is translating the somatic experience of artillery fire into a fantasy context.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the sheer overwhelming volume of the enemy isn't there just to look impressive. It is there to induce a very specific state of psychological vulnerability in the reader. It mirrors the soldiers on the ground.
So it's not about making the elephants look cool. It's about making you feel the absolute paralyzing terror of being stepped on by one.
Precisely.
It's like the difference between looking at a schematic of a pressure cooker and actually being trapped inside the boiler room when the valves start screaming.
That is a perfect analogy. The unwinnable scenario isn't just a dramatic trope here, it is an emotional necessity. By pushing Gondor to the brink, by stripping away all the political abstraction and high-minded strategy, you are left with nothing but raw, terrifying survival.
Just baseline survival mode.
Yeah. Every single charge matters because the baseline expectation has been set to absolute zero. The text has convinced you, the reader, that all is lost.
Which it really feels like at that point in the book.
It does. Therefore, when a character takes an action, it isn't a tactical maneuver in a grand game of chess. It is a desperate terminal flailing against the dying of the light.
Which makes the transition to the individual characters so incredibly jarring, but in the best way possible.
Oh yeah, the pacing is brilliant.
Because the source material points out that right in the middle of this mechanized, almost industrialized meat grinder of a battle, we get a hyper-focus on King Théoden of Rohan.
The emotional core of the scene.
Yes. And this is where I really want to challenge the structure of the narrative, because on paper, it feels incredibly punishing to the reader. Well, Théoden embodies the ancient, noble warrior king. He is essentially ripped straight out of Beowulf.
Very much so.
He rallies his men. He leads this fearless, mythic charge. His presence literally changes the atmospheric pressure of the battlefield.
The whole arise, arise, Riders of Théoden speech.
Exactly. Chills every time. And then he is unceremoniously crushed by his own horse and dies.
Yeah, it's brutal.
Honestly, from a narrative engineering standpoint, why do this? Why spend an entire book building a hero back up from psychological ruin, restoring his mythic strength, only to brutally strike him down in the mud the very moment he achieves his glory?
It feels unfair, right?
It does. Is it just literary sadism?
No, it's not sadism at all. It's an ontological argument about the nature of war itself.
Okay.
The analysis you provided points directly to the realism underlying this epic storytelling. If Théoden simply rode in glowing with ancient mythic power and routed the enemy without a scratch...
Then we're just reading a comic book.
Exactly. We are back in the realm of the fairy tale. We are back to meaningless spectacle. But by striking him down, the narrative is staging a collision between two incompatible eras of human history.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. Théoden represents the old world. You know, the world of chivalry, of the heroic cavalry charge, of the king leading from the front.
Glorious warfare.
Right. But the Pelennor Fields represents the new world, the mechanized, indiscriminate slaughter of the 20th century, where a bullet, or in this case a Nazgul, does not care about your royal bloodline or your poetic redemption arc.
Ah, so the myth provides the courage to ride out, but the myth offers zero physical protection from the shrapnel.
Exactly. It's a harsh reality check. And that is why the analysis lingers on the specific framing of his death.
Right, the way it's described.
The text notes he, quote, dies with honor, surrounded by those who loved and followed him.
Which is rare in modern war.
It's almost impossible to achieve. In a post-chivalric modern warfare context, a good death just doesn't really happen. Men died anonymously in the mud.
Yeah, alone and terrified.
So by allowing Théoden this heroic conclusion, the author is providing a bridge. He is acknowledging the brutal reality that heroes die, but he's preserving the dignity of the heroic choice.
That's a beautiful way to put it.
The victory isn't in his survival. The victory is the undeniable fact that he chose to ride out at all, shaking off the paralysis of despair.
Right.
His death grounds the soaring fantasy in a devastating realism that validates the very real trauma of the reader.
Man, that reframes the entire concept of victory for me.
Doesn't it?
Yeah, because we are so conditioned by modern pop culture to equate a heroic conclusion with standing on top of the rubble, completely unscathed, holding the magic sword.
Posing for the camera.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But here, the heroism is purely in the willingness to be broken for the cause.
Yes.
And that creates a massive vacuum on the battlefield.
Yeah.
Because Théoden's fall proves that traditional hypermasculine mythic heroism, like the guy with the biggest sword and the loudest war cry, isn't enough to survive this new type of war.
It fails. It fundamentally fails against the new machinery.
Which brings us perfectly to the vacuum that the enemy exploits. The Witch King of Angmar.
Oh, the ultimate manifestation of this new, terrifying reality.
Right. And what makes him terrifying isn't just that he has a big mace or rides a flying monster.
Although those help.
They definitely help. But the analysis zeroes in on a very specific phrase. terrifying confidence.
Mm.
And this confidence is entirely rooted in a prophecy. No living man may hinder me. Now, here's where it gets really interesting, especially for those of us who love to dissect the linguistics of world building.
Oh, the word nerds are going to love this part.
We absolutely are,
Mm-hmm.
because we have this seemingly invincible villain cloaked in a magical prophetic loophole. And he isn't defeated by an elven lord with a legendary glowing blade.
Yep.
He is defeated by Eowyn and Merry, by a woman and a hobbit.
The two people told to stay behind.
Exactly. So how does the text explain the mechanics of this? Because it's not just a lucky stab, right? It's a structural subversion of destiny itself.
It is entirely a linguistic trap sprung by hubris.
Hubris, yeah.
If we dive into the philological roots of this, which, by the way, is exactly the kind of deep analysis communities like Princess Toynerd love to pull apart,
Shout out to them again.
we have to look at the author's background. Tolkien was a professor of Anglo-Saxon and English language and literature.
You knew his words.
He spent his life studying words, specifically Old English riddles and texts like Macbeth.
Oh, wait, Macbeth.
Yeah, you can draw a direct line from the Witch King's prophecy to the witches in Macbeth telling Macbeth that none of woman born shall harm him.
Oh my gosh, yes. And then Macduff is like, I was from my mother's womb untimely ripped. The C-section loophole.
Exactly. It's a semantic loophole. Macbeth thinks woman born means every human being, but the prophecy was operating on a hyper-literal medical technicality.
Wow, okay.
But here's the kicker. Tolkien notoriously hated the Macduff loophole.
Really, he didn't like it.
No, he felt it was a cheap trick, a cop-out. So here, he constructs a much more profound linguistic subversion.
Okay, lay it on me.
The Witch King hears no living man and interprets man as the species, the race of men, humanity in general, and perhaps specifically the great towering warriors of old, like Théoden.
Right, he's looking for a guy in shiny armor.
Exactly. But in Old English, the word man simply meant a human being, while were meant a male human and with meant a female human.
Ah, I see where this is going.
The Witch King's terrifying confidence is born of pure hubris. He is so utterly consumed by his own power and so blinded by a patriarchal, rigid view of what a threat looks like that he cannot even comprehend the existence of a combatant who falls outside his narrow definition of power.
He looks at Eowyn and Merry, and his brain literally cannot process them as variables on the battlefield.
They are invisible to him.
He fails the riddle because he lacks the imagination to solve it.
Yes. His absolute power makes him absolutely rigid. And this is the mechanical brilliance of the scene. The subversion of the prophecy isn't magic. It is the ultimate example of asymmetrical warfare.
Right, they aren't casting spells at him.
No, Eowyn and Merry don't overpower him with brute force. They exploit his conceptual blind spot.
That is so cool.
The analysis points out that this ties perfectly into the overarching thematic thesis of the entire mythology, that the smallest, most overlooked individuals can change the course of history.
The hobbits.
Yeah. They represent the variables that the machinery of evil simply does not know how to calculate.
Which is such a brilliant foil to Théoden when you think about it.
How so?
Well, Théoden was the towering, obvious threat, and he was neutralized by the raw physics of the battlefield. The machinery got him.
Right.
But Eowyn and Merry are the invisible threats, the underestimated anomalies, and they actually managed to shatter the invincible centerpiece of the enemy's army.
It's a masterstroke of thematic balance.
It really is. But I mean, even with the Witch King gone, the boiler room is still highly pressurized.
Oh yeah, the battle's far from over.
The Gondorians are still vastly outnumbered. There's still Mumakil running around, which means we need a macro shift in the battle. We need Aragorn.
The arrival of the black ships up the River Anduin.
Right. And here is where I need to play the skeptic again.
Bring it on.
Because on a purely structural level, we already had a massive cavalry charge to relieve the siege. The Rohirrim arrived at dawn to save the day.
The Horns of Rohan.
Yeah. So why, from a pacing standpoint, do we need another dramatic, last-minute reinforcement arriving by boats? Isn't that just repeating the exact same cavalry over the hill trope twice in one chapter?
It sounds repetitive on paper, sure.
Yeah. I mean, the analysis claims Aragorn brings fresh strength. But how does this tactical military reinforcement escalate beyond what Théoden already did? How does this become the deep political and spiritual symbol that the source material claims it is?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, you'll see why the pacing demands this two-stage relief.
Okay.
Théoden's arrival was visceral. It was about physical survival. It broke the immediate physical siege of the gate.
Right, to stop the bleeding.
Exactly. But Aragorn's arrival is ontological. It is about the restoration of reality itself.
Whoa, reality itself.
Think back to the psychological groundwork the Tact laid down. Gondor has been a kingdom without a king for generations.
Centuries, even.
Right. They are fighting a seemingly endless war of attrition, led by a steward who has, frankly, descended into absolute nihilistic despair.
Denethor. Yeah, he literally burns himself alive.
They are spiritually bankrupt. The architecture of their society is hollowed out.
So it's not just a military deficit, it's a soul deficit.
Exactly. They are suffering from a cultural malaise, a deep ingrained trauma that a simple influx of extra swords just cannot cure.
Right.
So when Aragorn unfurls that standard on the ship, the text explicitly states that his arrival symbolizes the return of hope and leadership to the kingdom.
The King's Banner.
Yes. This is the divine right of kings colliding with desperate logistical need. Aragorn isn't just bringing reinforcements, he's acting as a massive psychological pressure valve for the entire civilization.
Oh, I see.
The analysis argues that the fresh strength he brings is fundamentally different from the raw kinetic energy of the Rohirrim. It is the sudden, shocking realization that there is actually a future worth fighting for.
Because the king is back.
Right. The tide of the battle turns because the existential dread of the Gondorians has been lifted. The king has returned, which means the world makes sense again.
It's the difference between receiving a blood transfusion to stop from bleeding out versus finally being cured of the underlying disease.
Yes.
Théoden was the tourniquet. Aragorn is the cure.
That is a perfect way to conceptualize it. The turning of the tide is as much about morale, destiny, and the restoration of order as it is about flanking the enemy.
But even with a cure administered, the patient has still undergone massive trauma.
A ridiculous amount of trauma.
And this is where the source material executes a really fascinating tonal pivot, because the battle ends. The tide shifts, the enemy is routed, and Gondor stands.
They won.
They won. But the analysis makes a very pointed effort to focus on the aftermath, the bittersweet anatomy of victory. It explicitly states that the fields are littered with the fallen and the scars remain.
This is perhaps the most crucial takeaway from the entire deep dive. The thesis statement here is, Tolkien doesn't treat war lightly.
So what does this all mean for us as readers? Because again, contrast this with how we usually consume these massive epic narratives.
Right, modern media.
Usually when the Death Star explodes or the portal in the sky closes, the music swells, the heroes embrace, and there's a massive, unblemished celebration.
Everyone gets a medal.
Right. The slate is wiped clean. But this text challenges you to view victory as an inherently scarring event.
It forces you to confront the cost. Remember the World War I parallels we talked about earlier?
A song.
You can survive the Somme, you can technically win the battle, but if you look to your left and your right and all your friends are gone, is it a celebration?
No, not at all.
The text balances glory and tragedy, insisting that they are not mutually exclusive. They exist simultaneously.
They have to.
The glory of Aragorn reclaiming his city is inextricably bound to the tragedy of Éowyn weeping over Théoden's broken body. The analysis argues that true heroism within this narrative framework lies entirely in sacrifice.
Wow.
It's not about fighting and remaining pristine. It is about bearing the physical and psychological cost of the conflict.
And the cost doesn't just vanish when the sun comes up.
No, it lingers.
The concluding thought of the analysis points out that even though the Battle of the Pelennor Fields is won, the struggle against Sauron is far from over.
The ring is still out there.
Exactly. The ultimate fate of Middle-earth remains deeply uncertain. The existential threat is still breathing down their necks.
Which is the ultimate subversion of the blockbuster climax. In real history, a single battle rarely ends a war with a neat bow.
There's always paperwork.
Yeah.
And more fighting.
There is always the day after. The trauma persists. The healing takes infinitely longer than the breaking. The review is praising the text for acknowledging that survival in the moment does not guarantee safety tomorrow. It leaves the reader and the characters in a state of suspended relief. You are breathing, but you're breathing in the ash of your own burning fields.
It's utterly exhausting, but I mean, it's exactly why these stories endure.
Exactly.
And that actually brings us to the meta layer of what we are doing today, because as you noted, when you sent us the source material, This deep analysis didn't come from an academic journal locked in some university library.
No, it did?
It came from the Princess Toy Nerd community. It came from modern fans on YouTube dissecting these exact themes in the comments.
Which is incredible.
It is, and I think we have to address why we do this. Like, why do we need platforms like this to pull these stories apart?
Well, because we no longer have mead halls.
Oh, interesting.
We no longer gather around a communal fire to listen to the skald or the bard recite the epic poems of our ancestors. But the psychological need to collectively process mythic stakes, trauma, and the concept of heroism that hasn't disappeared from the human hard drive.
We still crave it.
It is deeply embedded in us.
So the YouTube comment section, the video essays, these deep dives,
Yeah,
they are the modern campfires.
precisely. The medium has evolved, but the sociological function remains identical. When a community like Princess Toy Nerd engages in these exciting discussions that keep the adventure alive, they aren't just engaging in frivolous escapism.
It's not just nerding out.
No, they are collectively processing 20th century trauma through a 21st century digital medium using a mid-century mythic text as the cipher.
That is wild to think about.
When readers discuss the bittersweet nature of victory or the linguistic subversion of the Witch King's prophecy, they are exploring their own real-world anxieties about power, destiny, and the cost of conflict in a safe communal space.
The space where they have control.
Right. Epic fantasy provides the vocabulary for us to discuss the darkest parts of the human experience without being completely overwhelmed by them.
That is just a stunning way to frame it. We are using fantasy to process reality, and we are using community to ensure we don't have to process it alone.
Beautifully said.
Well, let's wrap up the incredible journey we've been on today.
It's been a ride.
We started by plunging into the raw, sensory deprivation of the Pelennor Fields, exploring how mechanized warfare translates into the terrifying thunder of war elephants. We analyzed the devastating collision of ancient myth and modern realism through the crushing death of King Théoden.
A true hero's end.
We dissected the intricate linguistic hubris of the Witch King and how his patriarchal blindness allowed the ultimate asymmetrical warfare of Éowyn and Merry to basically subvert prophecy.
The Macbeth loophole. Done right.
Done right, exactly. We explored the ontological weight of Aragorn's arrival as a psychological pressure valve. And finally, we grappled with the heavy, inescapable truth that in masterful storytelling, victory is never a clean slate. It is a permanent scar that we must collectively process together around our modern digital campfires.
It truly is a staggering achievement of narrative design. But before we sign off, I actually want to leave you with one final lingering question to turn over in your mind.
Ooh, I love these. Let's hear it.
Something that builds on the absolute core of today's deep dive.
Right.
The concept of prophecy and the Witch King's downfall.
Okay.
We established that the Witch King's terrifying confidence came from a rigid, literal interpretation of a prophecy, which was then subverted by Éowyn and Merry exploiting a semantic loophole.
Right. No living man.
Exactly. They fulfilled destiny in an entirely unexpected way. But think about the mechanics of that for a second.
Okay.
If destiny, or the underlying architecture of the universe, was truly acting upon them to create that specific unexpected fulfillment, does that mean Éowyn and Merry were actually acting of their own free will?
Oh, wow.
Right. Or were they, despite their immense bravery, simply actors playing out a grand, pre-written script that even the Witch King misunderstood?
That is messing with my head.
When a linguistic prophecy is woven into the very fabric of a world who is really winning the battle on the Pelennor Fields, is it the individual heroes making desperate choices in the mud, or is it the cold, deterministic hand of fate itself?
Oh, that is a phenomenal question. Are we the authors of our own courage, or just the punchlines to a cosmic riddle?
There's something to chew on.
That is going to keep me up tonight.
Uh-huh.
Thank you so much for bringing us this incredible source material and for joining us on this deep dive.
Thanks for having me.
And to you listening, keep engaging with these massive, beautiful stories. Keep analyzing the hidden architecture beneath the text. And as always, stay curious.